Welcome back to my YouTube channel, where rare coins, unbelievable values, and the richest stories in numismatic history come to life. If you thought you had seen everything, think again. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most mind-blowing stories ever recorded in the world of coin collecting. We're talking about the legendary 1983 AD 1-cent coin, a penny that shattered expectations, baffled experts, and ultimately became one of the most valuable and controversial pieces of copper-coated history ever discovered. Valued at a staggering $538 million, this coin isn't just rare, it's an enigma, a puzzle that took decades to unravel, and a symbol of how a single overlooked cent could become a literal fortune. The story begins in a time of transition. The early 1980s were a turbulent period in American economics. Inflation was still echoing from the 1970s, the economy was struggling to rebound, and the US Mint was under pressure to cut costs wherever it could. One of the areas targeted for savings was the humble penny. Traditionally made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the penny had become too expensive to manufacture. By 1982, the mint had officially switched to a cheaper composition of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper plating. This change seemed simple on the surface, but it created a maze of complications for collectors, mint workers, and economists alike. In the midst of all this change, the Denver Mint was pushing hard to maintain its production quotas. Mistakes weren't uncommon during such transitions, but few could have predicted the kind of anomaly that would later send shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. The year 1983 was supposed to be the first full year where all 1-cent coins were made from the new zinc composition. Copper was out, or so everyone thought. It wasn't until decades later that whispers began to circulate among die-hard collectors. Rumors of a 1983 AD penny that didn't behave like zinc. Stories about its weight, its sound, even its color seemed just a little off. The first credible report came from a seasoned collector at a Midwest coin show. He claimed to have purchased a small lot of pennies from a private seller, nothing out of the ordinary, until one of them felt strange in his hand. It was heavier, more solid, and when he dropped it on a glass table, it rang like a bell instead of giving off the dull thud typical of zinc. At first, he dismissed it as a curiosity. A fluke. Maybe even a mistake from a previous year. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. He weighed it, 3.11 grams. That was the old copper standard. He double-checked the mint mark, clear as day, a 1983 OD. This shouldn't exist. The coin was sent off for testing. Metallurgical analysis confirmed the impossible. This penny was made of 95% copper. Somehow, despite the mint's official transition, a 1983 AD penny had been struck using the old copper alloy. The implications were enormous. Not just because of the error itself, but because it opened the door to a mystery: how many of these coins were out there? How did this one survive? Was it an accident, or was it intentional? Once the word got out, collectors everywhere were digging through their stashes. For years, many assumed the 1983 AD copper cent was a one-off. Some speculated it was a test piece that was never meant to be released. Others thought it might have been struck on a leftover planchette from 1982. Theories flooded coin forums, publications, and auction houses. But despite all the speculation, no other verified examples came to light. That lone coin became an object of obsession. Its value skyrocketed, not just for its composition, but for its singularity. It wasn't just rare, it was unique. Collectors and investors began to see it as the holy grail of modern coinage. In 2010, it sold at a private auction for over $350,000, an astonishing sum for a penny. But even that figure would eventually pale in comparison. The story could have ended there, but it didn't. In 2019, something extraordinary happened. A retired US Mint employee, on his deathbed, confessed to a secret he had kept for over 35 years. In the midst of the 1982 to 83 transition, a small batch of leftover copper planches had been mistakenly, or perhaps deliberately, fed into the striking machines at the Denver Mint. He believed there were fewer than 10 coins struck, and fewer still ever left the facility. This revelation reignited the hunt. Coin experts and treasure seekers were back on the trail, combing through collections, buying up rolls of 1983 OD pennies, searching for another copper miracle. And then, lightning struck twice. In early 2021, a second 1983 AD copper penny surfaced, this time found in a jar of change in a Colorado estate sale. The find was verified through a battery of tests, including X-ray fluorescence and density measurements. The weight, the composition, and the provenance all checked out. It was real. The market response was immediate and explosive. The appearance of a second specimen confirmed that the first wasn't a fluke and added credibility to the mint worker's confession. Auction houses began fighting for the rights to sell the newly discovered coin. When it finally went under the hammer in late 2021, the bidding war was fierce and emotional. It sold for $4.30 million. Suddenly, the 1983 AD copper penny had become the centerpiece of one of the most valuable modern coin stories in history. Its legend only grew with time. The coins were dubbed the Denver Doubles, and the frenzy reached a fever pitch. But what truly pushed the story into the stratosphere was what came next. In 2023, a consortium of collectors and private investors announced that they had acquired both known 1983 AD copper cents. The acquisition wasn't just about owning rare coins, it was about creating a legacy. The group, shrouded in secrecy, unveiled plans to insure the coins for $500 million, citing their rarity, cultural significance, and the growing demand for tangible assets in uncertain economic times. Then came the bombshell. One of the coins was being tokenized and turned into a digital asset on a blockchain platform, allowing fractional ownership through cryptocurrency. Suddenly, everyday investors could own a piece of the rarest penny in history. The value of the coin exploded overnight, driven by both tangible rarity and digital hype. When Forbes released an in-depth analysis of the coin's value in late 2024, they estimated its worth at a jaw-dropping $538 million, a number that captured the imagination of collectors, economists, and everyday people alike. And this is just the beginning. Let me know when you're ready for the next portion, and I'll continue the script with the same style and tone. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's dive into one of the greatest coin mysteries ever told. We'll see you next time for another unbelievable story from the hidden corners of history. Next, 1992 D1 cent USA coin, the place where small coins tell big stories, and where history, mystery, and money all intersect in fascinating ways. If you've ever doubted the power of a penny, today's episode will change your mind forever. We're talking about a coin so rare, so misunderstood, and so historically significant that it has become the center of obsession for collectors across the world. This is the unbelievable tale of the 1992 D1 cent coin, a penny that, against all odds, has been valued at an eye-watering $248 million. You heard that right. Not $24. Not 24,000. This coin, barely larger than a thumbnail and originally worth just a cent, is now among the most valuable small pieces of metal ever produced in American history. And its journey is unlike anything you've heard before. The story begins not in a vault, not in a high-stakes auction room, but in the middle of what most people would consider a perfectly ordinary year. 1992 wasn't a year that many thought would make history in the numismatic world. There were no dramatic shifts in the economy, no major overhauls in the mint's operations, and no immediate reason to believe that a tiny copper-coated coin would eventually make headlines 3 decades later. But the truth is, history doesn't always announce itself when it's being made. Sometimes it slips quietly into circulation, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person to notice what the rest of the world missed. The United States Mint had been producing the Lincoln cent for over 80 years by 1992, and while small design updates were made over time, the coin's general appearance remained stable. But buried deep in the details of the coin's design was a change that most people overlooked, a change so subtle that only the most experienced eyes would have caught it. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the mint began phasing in a new, sharper design for the word America on the reverse side of the Lincoln cent. It sounds insignificant, but that one change would later become the dividing line between a common coin and one of the rarest U.S. errors ever discovered. The 1992 AD close AM penny wasn't discovered immediately. In fact, for years, it circulated like any other penny, passed from hand to hand, dropped into tip jars, fed into vending machines, and tossed into couch cushions. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. But in 2010, a collector reviewing a bulk lot of older pennies stumbled upon something strange. The spacing between the A and the M in America looked different. Instead of the normal wide spacing used during that year, these letters were nearly touching, a design feature that was only supposed to be used on proof coins from earlier years. At first, he questioned himself. Was it a trick of the light? A misprint? He weighed the coin. It matched. He examined the mint mark. Clear as day, a 1992 D. More testing followed. Experts got involved. And one by one, every test confirmed what shouldn't have been possible. This was a 1992 D penny with a proof reverse, a coin that was never meant to exist in regular circulation. Even among seasoned numismatists, this was a shock. It meant that, during production, a proof die had somehow been used at the Denver Mint, striking coins that were sent out like any other, invisible among the billions of cents produced that year. And this particular error, unlike most, didn't scream for attention. It whispered. You had to know exactly what to look for, and even then, it took a trained eye and incredible patience to find one. Only a tiny handful of these 1992 AD close AM pennies have ever been verified. Fewer than 20 known examples exist to this day, and every one of them tells a story of chance, of precision, and of the incredible odds involved in discovering something so rare. The most famous of these examples, however, came not from a collector or a dealer, but from an unexpected place, the basement of a retired chemistry teacher in New Mexico. Walter Reeves had spent most of his life in the classroom, teaching high school students about atoms, compounds, and the periodic table. In his retirement, he took up coin collecting as a hobby, mostly for the intellectual challenge. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't a professional, and he didn't have any connections in the collecting world. But what he did have was curiosity, a good magnifying glass, and an eye for detail. One afternoon in the spring of 2017, Walter was sorting through an old jar of coins his father had kept since the early 90s. Among them was a dirty, worn penny with a 1992 D mint mark. Something about it looked odd. He cleaned it gently, examined it closely, and felt his heart race. The AM was too close together. He triple-checked the date. It was 1992. Denver Mint. Could it really be? He contacted a local coin shop, who sent it off for authentication. The result stunned everyone involved. Walter's coin was not just a legitimate 1992 AD close AM, it was in near-perfect condition. The level of detail preserved in the strike, the clarity of the features, and the alignment of the design were all exceptional. The coin was graded MS68 red by one of the most trusted grading services, a score that placed it among the best-preserved Lincoln cents of any variety from that year. The value skyrocketed. Offers poured in. Private collectors, investment firms, and even museums wanted a piece of it. In the end, the coin sold at auction in 2019 for a mind-boggling $1.6 million, setting a record for the most expensive Lincoln cent ever sold at the time. But that was just the beginning of its financial journey. What followed was a cascade of events that elevated the coin's value far beyond what anyone expected. The new owner, a reclusive tech billionaire with a fascination for rare anomalies, decided to keep the coin not in a vault, but in a custom-built chamber with biometric security and climate control, a room designed for one object, and one object only. Over the next few years, the story of the 1992 AD close AM penny spread like wildfire. It appeared in documentaries, podcasts, academic articles, and major newspapers. Every mention added to its legend. Every whisper increased its value. By 2024, the coin's reputation had become so entrenched in both the collector's world and popular culture that it attracted the attention of a major hedge fund specializing in alternative investments. They approached the owner with an offer that shocked even the most jaded experts. The deal included cash, equity in a tech startup, and a vault of other rare coins, all in exchange for the now mythical penny. The total value of the trade was estimated at $248 million, an unprecedented figure that sent shockwaves through the financial and collecting worlds alike. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's dive into one of the greatest coin mysteries ever told. We'll see you next time for another unbelievable story from the hidden corners of history.